Hello and welcome to our look ahead to what the papers are bringing us tomorrow. With us are Daily Mirror's Deputy Political Editor James Lyons and theologian and writer Vicky Beeching. Welcome both. Tomorrow's front pages then. Here's The Guardian. It's reporting on the proposals for snap inspections by school inspectors and says that all of Birmingham schools could be taken over after the so-called Trojan horse plot. The Daily Telegraph leads with the allegations of Islamic extremism in some of Birmingham schools. The paper says that the Prime Minister will order Ofsted to conduct unannounced inspections. The Times says the Education Secretary Michael Gove has been told by David Cameron to launch dawn raids on schools. The Daily Mail claims that patients are finding it hard to get a GP appointment as many surgeries shut for half a day during the week. The Daily Express has a story about the arrest rates for illegal immigrants in the UK. The Daily Mirror says a new search for the body of Moore's murder victim Keith Bennett will begin next week. And the Metro leads with a row over the 2022 World Cup, saying that some of the biggest sponsors have raised concerns over corruption allegations. Well, it's been a story that's been rumbling on for weeks and it's still not over. This is the Trojan horse letter to do with suggested plot in Birmingham at some schools for hardline Muslims to take over the running of those schools. Here's how The Guardian's covering this story. Number 10 demands snap Ofsted inspections. Cameron acts over Trojan horse row. Birmingham faces schools overhaul. Well, the first suggestion is that schools should no longer get a warning that they're going to be Ofsted inspected. And this isn't just Birmingham schools, it would apply to all schools as a result of this. If it goes
It is a very good point, because most schools would get 1 or 2 days warning, and you can actually do a lot in that time period to rectify what you're teaching. You can suddenly schedule things that you wouldn't have otherwise. And that's what they're saying in this piece, that actually these schools were suddenly scheduling Christian lessons, so lessons about Christianity that wouldn't have necessarily been on the timetable, but they put them in just to prove that they were having balance. Whereas if you arrive unannounced, you can really see what's going on. So to me, it seems like a pretty good safeguard. We don't know what's going to be in these reports yet. I mean,
we've got a pretty fair idea.
Well, 21,
comprehensively leaked.
But there are 21 schools that, that we've got to wade through all of that information tomorrow. How damaging has this been for interfaith relationships, do you think, James? Because there are some people in the Muslim community who feel that they've been vilified in the way that this is being conducted. A letter that might even have been a hoax in the first place, not dated, not signed.
Yeah, I'm sure there are a lot of Muslims, particularly in Birmingham, who feel particularly ill-used by the whole row and some of the intemperate language that's gone on around it, and they are undoubtedly sort of victims of what may have been going on here, just as much as the pupils. So it is obviously going to inflame tensions at a time when we have politicians running around trying to inflame tensions. So that's very regrettable. These snap inspections sound like a great idea. I don't really understand why they weren't going on beforehand, and not just in cases where there's suspected extremism. Why are schools given notice of inspectors turning up? Although frankly I'm a little surprised that the schools have managed to pull the wool over the inspectors' eyes quite so well. Cause, I think we all know that small children tend to blurt things out, regardless.
The most awkward of moments.
Yes.
Yeah.
Let's have a look at how the Daily Telegraph's reporting this. Spot checks for Trojan horse plots. I mean, it wouldn't just be spot checks for specific schools. It sounds like it could apply to all schools. The suggestion is as well that perhaps all of the schools in Birmingham will be sort of taken over in some sort of swoop by central government, or the possibility that they will all have to become academies. But won't that allow schools to have even more autonomy from the local authority?
Well, what actually many people have been saying is this whole situation highlights the problems with the government's current reforms, which is basically getting the town hall out of any involvement with the local schools and just trying to give them loads of autonomy and then sort of try and keep them in check in Whitehall. And teaching unions and even Shirley Williams, the Lib Dem grandee, was saying today, you can't do that. One man in Whitehall, Michael Gove may be many things, but he's not Superman. One man in Whitehall cannot keep a check on every school in Britain. And if that's the only backstop we've got, then you're going to get problems like this.
Yeah.
Well, this is what's led, part of the problem that's led to the spat between two different departments. You know, who's responsible for schools and extremism in schools? Who's responsible for extremism? You know, is it?
And it is so crucial because children are so easily shaped at that age. And I think this Telegraph piece is saying that there are other things that are seen to be possibly lacking in the education system as well, including sex education, as well as, you know, religious education and things like that, that really round people out to go into the world as kind of fully educated, fledged citizens to deal with diversity and all the other issues they'll face. So I do think it's not just enough to be clamping down on the kind of core subjects. We also need to be giving people all of the other, you know, training that they need as children to go into the world and, you know, face difference, diversity, all that kind of stuff. I
just want to leap ahead, as this is a request to our producers and director, really, that I want to leap ahead to the Times, if that's OK, because that's where they're... We'll come back to the Telegraph in just a moment. Gove told to launch dawn raids on schools. I want to look at this because this is part of the same story. Cameron takes charge after minister's bust-up. Keith Vowles was saying today, James, that we need to sort of forget the politics of this now. I mean, this is a Labour MP who admittedly sits sort of more neutrally than that as the chair of the Home Affairs Select Committee. He's saying forget the politics in this. We need to be concentrating on what's happening with the schools and making sure that children are best looked after. That's not going to happen, though, is it?
Well, he also said that he'd be interrogating Theresa May and her former advisor Fiona Cunningham in the goodness of time. So I don't think Keith's completely done with the politics or the or what's gone in Whitehall. And you know, while what's obviously the welfare of the pupils has to be paramount here, the fact remains that they've been failed, and they've been failed by people in Whitehall, and by all accounts they've been failed by people in Whitehall for many, many years, and there has to be a reckoning for that, and people have to be held to account.
Yeah, allegedly they knew in 2010, didn't they? So if nothing was done in this time period, that is very, very serious.
Isn't there going to be a difficulty in assessing whether it really was a plot by hardline Muslims to take over a school, or is it just people who want to see a greater religious content to the way the school is run?
It's so difficult to even determine what extremism is, because I'm a Christian and I know there are a lot of Christian extremists that make me very embarrassed, and I'm always saying, well, I'm a Christian but I'm not that kind of Christian, and I do really feel for my Muslim friends who are seeing all these headlines and they're having to constantly explain the type of Islamic faith that they profess, that it's nothing like this. And I do think these headlines can actually almost cause more problems in society and actually help us to start kind of almost putting people into one camp. So I just think to temper these kind of headlines, we need to remember that extremists are such a minority when it comes to faith groups, and there are so many Muslims out there who now feel targeted in the way they want to bring up their children in a very peaceable way because of these headlines.
Just the definition of extremism is part of the row between Michael Gove and Theresa May, because Michael Gove takes a very strong line. He has very pronounced views on what constitutes, you know, Islamist thought. You know, some of his critics would suggest he has a problem with anyone who's got a beard, frankly. Whereas Theresa May is much more concentrating and dealing on people, you know, who may be a direct threat rather than.
That line has to be really clear, doesn't it? That it's, you know, this is a very small minority of Muslims, and we need to make sure that not everybody is held under suspicion just because they profess a certain faith. That's a terrible way to be.
Let's go back to the Daily Telegraph with a picture story there. Welcome to Rio, boys, and a picture of the England captain, Steven Gerrard, going into his hotel. They've just arrived in Rio de Janeiro for their World Cup attempt, which starts next Saturday against Italy. I sound like I know what I'm talking about, don't I? Miracle, really.
Are you a fan?
I shan't be watching very closely.
Me neither.
I should be taking the advice of the Royal Horticultural Society, which we'll come to in just a second. But just shows how expensive this tournament is, with the security presence outside this.
Well, there's been so much unrest, and I can completely see why, because so many of these people who are struggling in Brazil to, you know, pay rent are very unhappy that millions of pounds have been spent, I mean millions of dollars have been spent by their government, when many people don't have access to hospitals or to education. So much is being funneled into this. It's the most expensive World Cup ever, and it's going to result in unrest because of the imbalance. I mean, there's an injustice really in how their taxation's being used in their eyes if they don't have basic needs for living.
Could have said the same about the Olympics in Britain.
Well, very true. I mean, I'm not saying that I wouldn't say that, but I just think here, as we look at this nation with the World Cup, we also need to make sure our focus is on remembering the poverty there and the help that people need.
The suggestion, the counter-argument, is that always it brings in a lot of money to the country because of the publicity, the tourism.
Yeah.
everything that goes with the carnival that comes with the World Cup.
Yeah, I'd say, I mean, frankly, it leaves me a bit cold, so I'm probably not the person to ask about whether it's worth spending all these.
No, there's an interesting image on
dollars,
have you seen the image on that's viral at the moment? It's a picture of a starving young Brazilian child with a knife and a fork and a plate, and he's waiting for food, and a football comes and he bursts into tears. So I think that sort of that kind of really does encapsulate. Well, it's by a Brazilian street artist who's drawn this picture, and it's really gone viral. So I think they're sort of saying, although it brings in tourism and stuff, when your basic food needs are not met, it's very difficult to see your government's taxation going to building vast stadiums.
Let's look at the other story that's to do with the World Cup. It's a very
opportunistic
piece of marketing.
Someone deserves a pay rise.
The Royal Horticultural Society are telling us how to sort of use the time between the two halves of a football match. What happens if it goes to penalties?
There are a whole host of nighttime jobs that you can do in the garden, which will relieve the tension of the match, and also mean that you don't get behind on maintenance. They do suggest hoeing by moonlight.
Yep.
But
why, James?
Weeding as well.
Why?
Apparently, it's just a good time to do it, and it says that weeds and seeds need daylight. So there's all sorts of things you can do in the garden. But have they really thought about the time difference? Because this is going to be in the early hours of the morning. I might suggest that some people might have had a drink. Do we really want people, Well,
I think you can use beer to kill the slugs in your garden, can't you?
Win-win.
Yeah.
Win-win. One of the things I love about this piece is saying you can use just a few minutes here or there to accomplish tasks, and I think that's something that we often don't think of these days. We often spend all our spare seconds on Twitter. I know I do. And actually, if you break down big jobs like gardening into just little kind of 5-minute breaks, you get a lot done.
Had a phone like mine, Vicky.
Exactly.
That would sort it out for you.
Your non-smartphone.
Look on Twitter and you'll know what we're talking about. Let's move on to the Mail. Doctors, don't fall sick in the afternoon, because 1 in 4 GP surgeries shut for half a day of a week. Some of them are taking 4.5 hours for lunch. I can't really believe they're at lunch. They must be doing something productive in that time. But people are very cross. They can't get appointments.
They are. I mean, people are saying that often during the week, for part of the afternoon, you can't actually get to see your GP. I think probably what we need to be doing is actually looking at it very differently and celebrating our GPs more, so that more people actually want the job. They're doing a huge amount of work with an ageing population, vast amount more pensioners than they've ever had to cope with. The system is straining under a very rapidly changing population, and I think that if they need these extra hours, it says in the piece some of them are catching up on admin. It's not that they're slacking off, they're doing just a different kind of work.
Because some GP surgeries just refuse to cover antisocial hours, don't they?
They do. I mean, 4.5 hours is even longer than political journalists take for lunch, and we like to pride ourselves on a good lunch. But I mean, I think one of the problems here is that what we're seeing is we had these treatment centres that were being set up, where you could kind of walk in and all the rest of it, and they've been closing actually in recent years. And part of that is because the reorganisations of the NHS. This is a bit techie, but the GPs now get a say on what kind of provision is in their area. And so, as a result of this, funding has been taken away from some of these walk-in centres, which could just treat you when you turned up, because it's competition for the GPs, isn't it?
And if you can't get an appointment, people turn up at A&E.
They do, which is the knock-on problem, which causes mayhem.
Let's move on to the Daily Express, which says it has an exclusive here. Illegal immigrants pour into Britain. 2 million from 159 countries are already here, according to experts. But only 1 in every 70 migrants suspected of being in the country illegally is arrested. That's a pretty low hit rate, James, isn't it?
Yep, and it says it's Home Office figures, but without seeing them in their entirety, I would be reluctant to comment. But it's going to be one of the hottest summers ever, it also says, so that's good news.
It's a positive story, that is positive.
But the immigration story is going to loom large in
it is looming large,
election.
Absolutely. And even at the bottom of this piece, you've got newly elected UKIP MEP Tim Aker saying, things are out of control. And I think it frustrates me how they grab hold of these immigration stats and just scaremonger. I think we need to remember that immigration is actually really, really healthy for any society.
But not illegal immigration?
Not illegal immigration, no. But I mean, that's when I think UKIP take hold of it and apply it to all immigration that it frustrates me.
Let's move on to the Metro. Sponsors warn FIFA time to come clean. I mean, this is to do with Qatar's bid to host the 2022. Yet more allegations of corruption, and now the people who spend hundreds of millions of pounds to provide the sponsorship for the tournament And now they're saying we want to know what's really going on.
This is where all the allegations that are swirling around about Qatar and the 2022 World Cup get serious, because frankly, you know, if it's the likes of you and I complaining about it, then FIFA aren't really going to listen. But when it's the people who are paying their salary checks, they tend to sit up.
I mean, there is an investigation going on, and a lawyer is heading it up and reckoned to be doing, you know, will be doing a very thorough job. But it's the commercial aspect of this which will really apply the pressure, isn't it?
It is, and I love a lot of my academic work's done in ethics, and I have a real passion for ethics to be taken seriously and for, you know, justice to be restored in society, because there's so much shady stuff that does go on. And I love the fact that these massive corporations are saying that we need partners to have strong ethical standards. They're using words like integrity and fair play, and I just really, really hope we can hold that standard up.
That's
Are you suggesting they might not?
I'm just saying, quoting the piece.
We'd like to carry on, but the music's playing, so they want us to stop. James, Vicky, nice to see you both. Thank you very much. James's voice held out, so we're very grateful for that.